Hi, my name is Magda Bębenek and welcome to Wracamy do Natury, or Coming Back to Nature. Today you'll watch a conversation with Dr. Stephen Terrell, a world-renowned trauma therapist and educator, the creator of Transforming Touch, a somatic nervous system regulation focused modality, and one of my mentors. The first time we talked, and you'll find the link to that recording below, we discussed early childhood and developmental trauma, Stephen's area of expertise, and the work he does and teaches. This time, we dive into in utero and birth trauma and how they affect our adult lives. We recorded this conversation in September 2024, so about half a year ago. And since then, I've gained a lot more understanding of the topic, both professionally through my continued training as a somatic practitioner, and personally through touching into layers of everything you'll hear us talk about in my own healing journey. That's why I'm even more excited to share this conversation with you now than when we originally recorded it. And while moving through consecutive waves of those deep physiological imprints of fear, pain, shame, abandonment is not easy or comfortable. On the contrary, it might be some of the most difficult periods in our healing process. With the right tools, with the right support, and a commitment to slowly building our somatic capacity beforehand. So when those intensities do show up, we can stay present with them and renegotiate them. So much healing and liberation is possible. As Stephen says, regardless of what you've experienced in this lifetime or what kind of intergenerational inheritance you received at your moment of conception, you can absolutely heal. May his presence and wisdom offer some grace and hope, shining a kind light on the darkest and most difficult places. Enjoy our chat. Hi, Steve, and hi, everyone else.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
Good morning. Nice to see you as well. And thank you so much for being here again and talking to me and to us again. And the first time we met, we talked about early developmental and early childhood trauma. And so
Yes.
this time I invited you to be a bit more specific in a way, and talk about in utero and birth trauma,
Okay.
which, yeah, I say a bit more specific, but at the same time, there's such broad topics and it's such a multi-layered world. And we were just talking before we started recording how some things have been on your mind recently and landing even more for you in terms of
Yes.
the impacts of some of your experiences. So yeah, maybe we could start there.
Well, I thank you, Magda. I'm kind of this is an interesting topic to me, not just because of the work I do with clients or over the years, and it's kind of I am an example of someone who went through in utero trauma myself, and I identify as neurodivergent. I'm on the spectrum, and it's fascinating that even such places as TikTok has thousands of people that are neurodivergent now making all these videos talking about, oh, this is my experience and my experience, and all those experiences begin to be very familiar. Very familiar, very, very familiar. Because I was born early. My mother went to surgery not very long moments after my birth. There were lots of complications, stayed in the hospital a long time, um, born with spina bifida. Uh, they thought that I wasn't going to make it. They actually thought I was dead at birth, kind of no pulse, no nothing. Put me to the side, and a nurse realized I'd moved. And so they thought, oh, he's alive. But all of that kind of culminates into this realization that today, how many masks I have worn over the years, and the effective mask and the ineffective mask. And I think that those of us, and I think there's a lot of us,
Yeah.
I think that those of us who have experienced in utero trauma and childhood, infant trauma, toddler trauma, if the trauma just keeps going, looking at the outcomes of who we are and realizing that, yeah, I'm so grateful today because I realized the odds were never on my side.
Yeah.
Yeah, and understanding that and realizing those parts of me, that young heart, the young, system figured out how to survive in the most challenging of times, the most unhealthy of times, not only emotionally, but soulfully. As my soul was developing, as our souls are developing, as our our internal compass is developing, there's such tragedy, I believe. So for myself and realizing when I look back, I always tell my clients I'm 112, and I definitely probably am 112 now. I probably caught up with that age, but I look back and I go, only in the last few years have I understood it.
Mm. And you've been
Only in
in
the
the
last few
field.
years have I understood my behaviors and how they go back. Only in the last few years have I realized how to forgive those who didn't know any better
Mm.
and those who did know better and chose not to act appropriately. So this is an interesting topic for me because, you asked me quite a while back. I mean, and then you sent a very thoughtful email a few days ago. And my typical behavior is I'll read an email and go, oh, I need to respond to this. And then it goes into a file and then it gets lost. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles to read. And I just realized, am I ever going to read them? Probably not. But being with you is very special because, I know that we have some kindred spirit here, that there is some, not age, you're not nearly 112, but I identify so with and knowing you and knowing your heart
Mm.
is important. So I'm glad to be here but that was just on my mind. So thanks for, I don't know, rambling about it a bit, that um, probably part of my neurodivergence will show up. It's already shown up. I mean, I'm already self-stimming. I did my hands for years and years and years before I realized, oh, I'm self-stimming. I don't flap like some people with autism, and that's okay that they do, but I do this, or I do this, or I'm always doing something with my hands. Maybe I'm writing, pretending to take notes, something. So thank you. And yeah, what questions do you have? Ask me whatever you want. I'll tell you the answer. Or like I said earlier, I'll just say I don't know. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you as well. And your work and, meeting you and learning from you, yeah, has been very special for me as well. And
Mm,
thank you for sharing parts of your journey, of your early experiences. And what really stands out for me as I'm listening to you, and also as I was kind of getting some questions from people beforehand, and I was thinking about the topic, what really stands out for me is when you said that us, and that there's a lot of us.
yes.
And I think this understanding of birth trauma and the fact that there is something like in utero trauma, it's not that we're unconscious kind of, I don't know, little beings there in the womb. We actually are constantly communicating, getting information, and developing according to the information that we're getting from the mother's physiology, which is our
Yes.
first environment, right? So
Of
I think
course.
the more we recognize those aspects of our development, the more we can come to a conclusion that, wow, at this time, it would be really challenging not to have had traumatic experiences in utero or during birth. And I think still many of us might think that birth trauma might be just the big things, whatever that would be. But, you know, the stories that we hear of, I don't know, for example, my birth, I was an induced baby 2 weeks after, you know, after due date. And even with the induction, I didn't want to come. I think it took about a day. And then I was literally physically pushed out of my mother's belly to the point that she shared that, you know, she was so bruised up to her ribs that she couldn't touch herself for a week or two afterwards. And I didn't know of that. Like, I learned about it last year, right about this time of the year.
Oh
The
man, that's
thing
big
just,
information.
yeah, and so many things start making sense, like this idea of me pushing constantly in life, pushing myself, pushing others. And it's like, well, duh, if my first kind of experience on this side of life is being pushed out, but you know, that's the first imprint, right? And I was also thinking about it that we might kind of check babies in the hospital for, you know, their height and their weight. They might say, oh, they're healthy, they're all good,
Yes.
because maybe there isn't enough understanding of what the imprint of such a physical experience, emotional, well, physiological, I guess, maybe not so much emotional at that time, what it does. So maybe, yeah, maybe if you could tell us how you understand birth trauma and in utero trauma in general, what did we used to think about what babies sense and fetuses sense and what we know now? Uh,
Yeah.
so
Well,
yeah.
there's a flood there. I mean, that's a flood of information. Plethora, as they say. I never used the word plethora, but I do like it now that I've started using it. So there's a plethora. So there's so much, you know, you gave a beautiful story.
Mm,
My mom has passed her due date. We're 2 weeks past. They've probably hung Pitocin, something to speed up the delivery process, which is in itself a trauma drug.
yeah.
It isn't something, you know, it's coming in and it's kind of flooding a system to try to get this, you know, some dilation to happen for the baby to get in position, for the baby to get born. And it's used frequently. So there's trauma there before that push ever happened, you know. And then to imagine how hard they pushed on the baby, that they bruised and injured your mom. That we have to go back. We go back, and we go back to, you know, I always say the moment of conception is one of the greatest moments that we ever experience, of course. But that moment of conception, we have to look backwards. We look upline. I don't know if that's actually a sign for backwards, but we're looking back there, and we're going, okay, Magna, who who came before Magna? Who came before her? Who were her parents? Who were her grandparents? Who were her great grandparents? And her great great grandparents. After that, it gets kind of thinned out where we don't really know what's what. And it doesn't really matter, in my opinion, what's what. But what we do know is that the original gestational trauma began at conception because all of that unfinished trauma came into that being at the moment the sperm and the egg connected and they planted in the womb. This little cellular piece of cell, not a whole lot of nothing, goes into the womb. And then, you know, this is all happening over days, but what a disadvantage if upline we have a lot of trauma. And we know this is true because of the Holocaust studies that have been done and other studies on epigenetics. But what if we only started off at 80% or 50%? Maybe the trauma was so great. So we come in, and our very first familiarity in development is our previous trauma, because it's no longer external, it's no longer somebody else's trauma. That trauma has now come into us, and it's a part of who we are today. And I know there's a lot of treatments and a lot of therapies out there that say, oh, let's work on your developmental, the epigenetic trauma. I don't know how they separate it. I don't know how anyone separates any trauma, because it all kind of starts clumping together. And in my opinion, in utero trauma is probably some of the greatest. So where that is all occurring at conception, we also have to consider, what was the state of mind of the mother? What was the state of mind of the father? Or was it IVF? What was it? IVF still picks up all of the history comes in IVF. There's no way you're going to escape history. So your 100% at birth might have looked different than the baby in the bassinet next to you in the nursery of the hospital. You may have looked different. Your 100% may have already been drained a bit. And then we come into that first trimester. This glob starts to look like something. In the first trimester, the glob kind of begins to grow, and all of a sudden it starts little arms and a little head, not huge, not much, still kind of a blob, but the heart begins to flitter. It doesn't beat, it flitters. It's kind of, it's real light. Most of the time, you'd have to have a Doppler to even pick it up, um, some sort of skilled machinery. Only through blood work, urine tests, we can figure these things out. No, oh yeah, you're pregnant, there's something there. But it's not until, we're several weeks down the road when the heart starts. But the baby is already, the primitive reflexes are coming in the first trimester. The eyes are starting to develop, the ears, and we know hearing comes on in the first trimester. So that first trimester, if you have someone, the mother, if that mother is in a dangerous environment, if they're being attacked from the outside, if they're unsure of their life, maybe they married the wrong person. We don't know. But if there's something troubling the mother in that first trimester, and it repeats, develops that rhythm of repetition. The baby, as soon as we have that fear paralysis reflex coming on board, earliest primitive reflex. We know that sucking is coming on, rooting is coming on, all the things getting the baby ready, tonic labyrinth reflex, all of those things are already developing in the first trimester. But the powerhouse, when it comes alive, is going to be the fear paralysis. So when there's that repetition of events that are threatening, and threatening can be stress. Maybe they're at work and their boss is saying, I need to have this done by 2:00. It has to be done by, that kind of stress, or whatever stress, whether it's domestic violence or it's environmental, like a war, or maybe just hard times are there. And the worry that, how will I ever be able to take care of this baby? How will we ever have the money? All of that stress coming on, the fear paralysis begins to move that fetus, the baby, up against the wall of the womb. And it's the first time, I believe, and I don't know if this is recorded or not, but I'll say it's the first time where we're masking. It's the earliest moment of masking, I realized. Because if I'm up here against the wall, Magda, you're not going to see me, are you? You can't find me. You don't see me here to hurt me. You're no longer poking me. You're no longer putting gum in my hair. You're no longer making fun of me. All of those things, it's the original mask. And so I'm developing in a less than optimal place. So my hearing and the spine, think about the spine coming down, it's more like a teeny, 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 tiny string, almost like a thread at that moment. But along with the spine, hearing is coming on, which makes sense when we move forward in life and realize if we hear a sound in the night, we tune into that sound and we don't hear anything except sounds relating to that sound that we just heard. Our sound, we pick up whispers, we pick up tiny steps. So that is occurring in the very first trimester. We're hearing the sounds. We can't process completely what they are because they're fear, they're stress sounds. It's almost, I equate it to the thought that a moaning dog that someone's hurt, that you hear that cry, or a human that someone's hurt, you hear that cry. That's what that baby's getting in. They're getting that earliest sound of stress. So what do they identify with? Stress. So they look for, as they come on through and get birthed, they're looking for their stress, because their stress, man, that's their friend. That's the relationship now developed. Whether that's an overcoupling, meaning two events happening at the same time, development and stress, or threat, which stress is threat, doesn't matter. What matters is that here we are, first trimester, 12 weeks. We already learned the world is not safe. It's not safe in here. So if it's not safe in here, it's not safe out there. And I don't even know what out there is yet. So we move on with yours and we go, well, I wonder what happened in the first trimester with your parents. I wonder, if you think for a moment, what was your mother thinking at the time of conception? And then what was your father thinking? And how did those thoughts blend in? And how did that trauma filter in? And was I 100%? Because if I'm not 100%, everything can't develop fully.
Yeah.
Everything's developing a little bit less than.
Yeah.
Except our mask.
Yeah.
Our
And
mask will fully develop.
yeah.
Fully develop. You have to see me as normal as everyone else. Even though I don't know who everyone else is, I've already got the mask. I'm ready. Let's go forward. And so then we move up and we're going, okay, you were in the womb 9 months. Wait, you're not coming out? Why not? Why not?
I was just sharing with someone today that would be recording the interview, and like if the person had any questions that they might want to ask, because they also do nervous system work. And I just shortly described my experience. I was like, yeah, the information I got didn't make me too eager to come out into the world.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any idea when you think about, does anything come to mind for you?
I have like the general kind of reflections on what I think might have been happening in the physiology of both myself and my mother. But I've actually not kind of gone down the route of trying to figure it out more than that. I've had some experiences where I know I process stuff from the birth canal. Like even a year before I actually knew about the way I came into the world, I had this experience of like pushing and like so much tension in my neck, and I needed the practitioner to put their hands and like really, and I told her to really squeeze it, like I needed that pressure. And and at the time I didn't know much about in utero trauma or my own history, but I just immediately knew. I was like, okay, this is the birth canal, that's it.
Yeah.
And then following experiences through this nervous system work, I've had experiences where I know that was from in utero. I don't know how I know, but I just know, like I just know. So
I think
I think,
go ahead. I think that's the truth.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think what
like,
you know is the truth.
yeah. So it's really fascinating. So I have some pieces, and sometimes first I have the experience, and then some information comes from my family. So it's been a fascinating journey. But yeah, going back again to this idea that it's a lot of us. Like maybe some other people didn't necessarily have this part of my experience or parts of your experience, but honestly, like when I talk to my friends about their births, my clients who share, their giving birth stories and their being birthed stories, my partners, ex-partners, my friends, I don't really have people in my environment who experienced easy birth, either as the birthing person or as the person being birthed. So again, I think this idea of birth trauma and utero trauma is much wider than we realize. And I think so many of us struggle, whether it's anxiety, depression, relational, things, not being able to move forwards in life, not being able to build foundations. That used to be me. I used to be so all over the place. I had to be moving, had to be traveling, had to be active doing things. And then I would burn and crash. And for a year or two, I just, I couldn't really do anything. So there are so many different ways that we struggle. And I think because from the mass conversation, there is a lack of this understanding and conversation about this piece and how it affects us, we might feel guilty or ashamed or defective because we're trying the therapies and we're doing the self-development and we're doing the spirituality, and yet certain things are still there and we don't know that they're actually like deeply imprinted in the physiology of our earliest experiences. And for me, learning about fear paralysis reflex during our training was such an eye-opener. I was like, oh, there we go. Like I have not known no fear since the first trimester of my life.
Right.
That's just it.
Yeah. Even before
Yeah. Well,
first
yes.
trimester.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's definitely there. And yeah, and how well we respond to that trauma is how regulated a world we arrive in. There's that part that we forget about, but there are some people that have horrific trauma all the way through utero, and they come out and they're greeted, and you think about your mom, the pain of a baby
Yeah.
would have limited the amount of pressure she would have wanted to feel in those first days. But you look back and you think about some people go through all of this and they're born and they're in such an environment that things regenerate in a way. They redevelop through supportiveness. So I think it's not just about what happens in utero, but it's what happens at the welcoming gate.
And if
What
there is a
happens?
welcoming gate, right?
Yeah, you talked about shame, you know, well, and I hear this from a lot that if I were to tell the birth mom or birth dad or anyone, either adopted, it doesn't matter what relationship, but if I tell these stories, the greatest fear when we have primitive reflex activation in the first trimester equates to abandonment.
Mm.
So if I challenge you at all, Magda, if I go, Mom, what happened? Oh, it must, that her feeling of, oh, it must be my fault. It's not my fault. I don't want to remember this whole story anyway.
Yeah.
How they're responding and what's happening right there is shame, of course, is shame is the greatest coat we will ever put on.
Mm.
Shame is the insulator of the world. And when we realize that shame is a good guy, not a bad guy, shame, yeah, we welcome it. We welcome it, because if it weren't for shame, we'd have been beat up more. We'd have been made fun of more. We'd have had more and not less. So when shame intervenes in those early trimesters, it comes on board. And we're born with shame, we're insulated. We create an insulation in utero that carries us on into life. And at some point, it's no longer shame, because if I was born with it, I was born with this hand, I might as well keep it now.
Exactly.
And I don't even notice I have this hand unless I don't have this hand. If it's broken or in a cast, then I don't have it, I notice. But shame is the same way. So you're wearing a coat of shame right now. I'm wearing a coat of shame right now. So if you think about additional shame, oh my gosh, how heavy a weight that is to carry with us.
Yeah.
But it's a good thing.
Mm.
Because when we look at our autonomic nervous system, which is also coming on board in the first trimester, and we're looking at that autonomic nervous system, and we think about fear response, sympathetic, and parasympathetic, the calming response to it's broken in utero. It's already chronic.
Yeah.
Already chronic if we've had a lot of events in the first trimester of stress or threat. And it's depending on a crutch, and that crutch is the accommodation that's working, the mask, or, mask, I believe, is probably earliest, and shame comes in right with it, doesn't take long. And it's not even identified as shame then, it's just an insulator.
Yeah.
So it kind of hurts, because the only world I see is the world I see through my eyes today. I might sense the world and feel the world. Yes, I have those parts now. I'm not completely body dead, but I see the world through my eyes. And so that early shame must have been my fault.
Mm.
Must have been my fault. Or we get into um, the belief that some people say, oh, well, you chose this lifetime and you entered in this lifetime and this is your work. That doesn't make it easier.
That
That
is true.
doesn't help. It doesn't
It's
help.
true.
If life is crap, it does not help. It doesn't help, because shame is the doorway to depression.
Hmm.
Doorway, the more shame and more depression leads to isolation. The more isolation means I'm alone.
Yeah.
I'm alone. And you start talking to people with developmental trauma and you start hearing your relationships now. How many friendships do you have? How many places? How good was your mask is the bigger question.
Hmm.
Because how were you able to have these friendships? Did you have a lot of friends? Did you have one? And most of the time I hear I didn't have any friends, or I had one friend and eventually that friend left too, or maybe two friends. And then I get in relationships, partners. Oh my goodness,
Yeah. It's a
how
mess.
they get triggered. Yeah, yeah. They figure out so rapidly how to push us away or push us out.
Hmm.
And so where do you land, Ida? Are you in the in group? Or are you always being pushed out?
I think I'm rather the one pushing, and also pushing through things that maybe shouldn't be pushed for and that I shouldn't continue in. I think that would be more my particular setting and my default. And, I'm super glad to say that slowly things are changing. So I can see big differences in how I relate, but yeah, I think that would be me. more
What
the
would happen?
dependent and staying and
I'm curious, man, what would happen if we flip that?
hmm,
We flip the default and make the default normal, and that the other part that's experiencing the world is the default. What happens?
yeah, everything changes.
Because I think the default is the norm,
Hmm,
and the external part is the mask.
hmm,
So if I'm not looking at it as a default, like there's, oh, this is my go-to, and I go, this is who I am, and that's the masked part that's reaching out or pushing out is is you to be embraced.
hmm,
Pushing out. So how does that show up in relationship? Probably threatening for a lot of people.
hmm.
Probably threatening. And then there's that other group that goes, oh, that's exactly like me and it's familiar and come be my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what if our defaults are who we are? They're not really defaults.
Yeah, that's what I think is such an interesting space that opens up
Yes.
with the healing is that, yeah, who we thought we were and what we thought was normal, slowly, we start peeling those things away. It's like, oh, wait a second, no, that's
Enough.
not me. That's not what I like, or that's not how I feel and how I actually long to behave in
Yeah.
whatever sphere of life. And then suddenly it's like, in a way, it's a second birthing process, much longer because it might take years. But yeah, I think that's a fascinating piece, and it's also a difficult piece in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And how quickly we learn that that early part of who we really are is considered bad or weird or different. And that, I keep thinking about the way and the expression and that you used when you were saying pushed out, and you're going this way. And then you talked about the significance of the birth canal, and you came up from this, you come up to this right over your ears. So there's the first trimester. And then you said pressure, pressure, pressure. So you're looking for a reenactment.
Yeah.
You're looking for the unhealthy part. It's a great example of how we seek out other trauma,
Mm,
how we're already vulnerable to infant trauma, how we have this propensity to survive in a narcissist state into life. And someone would say, well, you're a narcissist. You're this. They want to come after our personality types. When in reality, we're not at all. We're infants that were traumatized. And
mm,
we were traumatized in utero, we're traumatized in those first months. We don't develop with that freedom. But, like autism, I never thought I had autism because I had emotions.
mm.
And I learned way back, even when I was in grad school, we were taught that autism didn't have emotions. And now I know that's the biggest lie in the world.
Yeah.
We may process them differently, but we're full of emotions.
Mm,
So, I come back up here and I think, what happens to you? And what happens when you just bring your hands there
mm,
and you don't reenact? Now there's more room for your head. There's room for the collapse and the expansion.
It is interesting because now I do feel a reaction. Like I feel a bit of nausea and I feel like some things coming up to my chest. And
Yes.
maybe also the stress of the recording and many things, but I think, just like stopping here for a moment, that's
Yeah.
it's an immediate something.
Yeah. So you notice that you had movement in here where
Mhm.
you were pushed here, but now all of a sudden you get movement here. And
Mhm.
then you say nausea.
Mhm.
Do you know anyone who enjoys nausea?
No.
Have you ever met anyone that said, give me more nausea? I want more. Dark, got it. Give me some more. Never.
Well, to be fair, I don't want more, but I've come to a place where I'm like, nausea, awesome. Okay, something's coming up
Yes.
and out.
Yes, I'm not dead. Yes. So think about, you know, you think go into teenager or even into adult or even latency period of life, people start cutting themselves.
Mm,
What happens when you cut yourself is that you get a rush of adrenaline
yeah.
and you don't think about what's happening in the moment. It's a brief break from the reality of the world you're living in.
Yeah.
So when you press your head, there's not nausea. It can't go hand in hand with the pressure.
Mm,
So it's like, let me reenact this so I don't feel, because if I don't feel, the world will be safer.
yeah.
It's a very creative mask, very creative mask. So just thinking about how we've already figured out how to avoid, how to withdraw. Before you ever got born, you already had those skills, you know?
That's pretty smart of us.
Pretty dang smart of us is
That's
what I would
pretty
say.
miraculous. Like in many ways, it's just like, yeah, we're wonders in so many different ways. And trauma and adaptation and how to survive included.
Yeah,
It's truly like sometimes when I think about where we are collectively as a world, individually, the type of experiences that we carry. And, through intergenerational trauma, it seems like we're carrying more and more. So the generations are, you know, being born right now, they have even more of that weight on their shoulders that, many are kind of crumbling under. And it's no surprise, I think. And it's also
uh,
obviously not their fault because they're just getting not only an environment that is so polluted and so toxic in so many different ways, but as you said, like from the moment of conception, they're just getting this huge kind of energetic charge of things
yeah.
that form like the fabric of who they are. And there might not be the easiest and the best types of experiences. So
Because we are, no matter what experiences we've had, all of those are who we are today.
yeah, and that's the
Yeah.
good news,
Yes.
because that means that we can work with what is here right now. And of course,
Yes.
we can work with regressions, and there are so many different modalities. But at the end of
Oh,
the day, everything's here, right? Whether it's
right.
my
I
trauma,
love that.
grandmother's trauma, or who, my cats or whatever, past life from 2000 years
Yeah.
ago, it's still here in these cells and these spaces in my body. So that's the good news. We can work with that. And a few people have asked, okay, so if you recognize that you do have birth trauma or in utero trauma, can you heal? And how do you go about it?
Well, the way you heal is absolutely. And the way you go about it is, in my humble opinion, what I figured out was through regulation of the autonomic nervous system, that really focusing on the autonomic nervous system, not so much the information, because we are who we are right now. So if I can regulate you right now, if I can begin that process of supporting yourself rather into regulation, not me doing it, but me being able to support it. If I can do that with you, then you're going to have less need from your accommodations. Your masks are going to be not as needed in the same way. but you're going to go through some suffering. I don't see anyone healing without suffering. I don't have any magic wand, and I've never seen one that worked. So there's going to be some suffering in there because all that trauma is who we are, but all of those experiences are going, wait, I've got some stuff in here that I want to revisit, and maybe I want to revisit it with tears and maybe withdrawal and maybe wrapping myself in a ball or however I'm going to experience it, seeing that as normalizing. And I think that the greatest healing that I've ever experienced in my life is the fact of knowing. So one of my issues is smell.
Mm-hmm.
I think you remember I think it was in our training, someone put some hand lotion on it and nearly killed me. Nearly killed me. It just, oh my gosh. But I was able to go, don't do that. Take care of myself. Don't, this can't happen. So I can now go into a department store and hold my breath to get past the cosmetic counters and the smells into the store. It doesn't leave. I didn't all of a sudden in my healing process yet. I'm not yet lost those difficult parts, so to speak, and realized they were there to keep me safe. But I haven't lost them. I'm just now aware of them, and I manage them differently. And I manage them through a self-regulation, and I manage them through auto-regulation with others where I did not experience that early on, except with other defective people, it seemed. And now being able to experience it unconsciously is my auto-regulation, but consciously is my self-regulation. So that's where I think healing takes us, or that's as far as I've got at this. After that, I don't know. But at this moment, I know that I can learn to manage those difficult parts of me, or what appear to be difficult, or triggered me to isolation and shame. So that's how I see healing. And yes, absolutely, we can all heal.
Yeah. And so we kind of started with, in a way, through the moment of conception with intergenerational trauma. And there were actually a few questions around that as well that people
Go
asked.
ahead.
I think some of that we've already touched on. And one of the interesting things for me that someone asked is like, what do you think, like when we're in our healing process, do you think that we heal the ancestral line? Do we heal that trauma kind of, I don't know how to call it, not really retroactively, because again, it's here. So it's in the present. It's not that we're healing the past in a way, because it doesn't exist. But like, what do you think? Does that heal our ancestors or family members that are, kind of connected with that traumatic experience that not traumatic experience, traumatic response and the charge that we carry in our systems?
I think that as we heal, we become more one with nature,
Mhm.
or one with God, or however we want to put that. But I think that as I become more one with nature, I'm going to be less reactive. And that's what I think trauma causes, is reaction. And so if I'm less reactive, I'm more able to establish better relationships. I'm more able to learn. I'm more able to grow. If I have a healthy parent or a healthy grandparent or a healthy friend in my life, I'm more likely to move towards more of an earned, secure attachment, which is healing me and the generations below. And we know that we have a direct effect on everyone going down that we're still in relationship with, unless we burn those bridges. We're going to be bringing about healing. And as far as going upline, they rejoice.
Mm.
They rejoice because they also get to experience something different. And so, yeah, I think it's a universal. When I become one with nature, you don't see me in the trees. I'm now part of the trees. I'm not standing out. I'm now in the flow of life that I was always supposed to be in, and probably am in, but you see me now. You may not see me then. So yes, I think It changes those that follow, as well as those who have already been born, and our peers. I believe they change. So yes.
Yeah, I have very similar views, and yeah, in some ways we inherit so many things that, at least, well, obviously everyone is different, every part of the world is different. It's difficult to generalize, but for myself, I have come to understand that I have received some really wonderful things that now enable me to heal the things that couldn't be healed before for many different reasons. Like you said, it doesn't change the fact that it's really difficult at times. And
Right.
sometimes I wish I didn't have to, but hey, here we are.
Yes.
Uh, and yeah, I do think that if we believe, and I do, that our essence as human beings, as souls, is pure and is good and is light and, is love, and we come this side of earth and different things happen that maybe pack that up in different things, in those masks that you're talking about, and the shame and the fear and everything that follows, then then when I think about my lineage and just human lineage in general, like when the healing happens in an individual and the present moment, it does pan out everywhere.
Yes.
It's like a
The
spheric
being.
thing that happens, not even linear. It's just kind of, it's like a
Yeah.
supernova explosion in a way.
Definitely. We beam. Our light gets brighter.
Yeah.
And it touches more. Yeah.
And then obviously the more light there is from individuals, then the more other people, beings, elements can kind of warm themselves up in that light, even if it's just a tiny bit. So
Exactly. I agree.
yeah. So I guess maybe that's a good place to finish with this image of just, yeah, getting a bit of warmth and support and caring from the light that we each shine. And yeah,
It,
may we shine even brighter and
yeah.
with less cost of doing business. I really love that expression that you use, meaning with more ease in our daily life, with more ease in our physiology and our relationships, um, and everywhere in between.
It's amazing. Of course, the sun is coming out here now. I mean, it's morning is breaking here where I am. And thinking of the light, I'm reminded of one of the earliest songs that I don't know why this popped in my head, except how you were talking about light and hearing that word light from you was this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. And I always thought that that was someone else's light that I was holding,
Mm,
this little light of mine. It never dawned on me to this moment that this little light of mine is me. And I'm going to let me shine. And in my shining, I can see you shining
mm,
safely, a
mm.
connection. I'm so grateful for you, for the work you're doing, for the healings you're bringing on this earth. Much gratitude and big hugs from Texas this morning. And look forward to hearing from you again and
Likewise.
seeing you,
Thank you so
hopefully.
much for being here. Hopefully in May. Let's see.
That'll
Um,
be great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you and
Good
have a
day.
good day. Bye
Bye.
now.